Now, it is my absolute pleasure. She and I have been chatting it up back here for the past 5 minutes, and I'm so excited for this phenomenal closing speaker. Helen Patton is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Security Business Group at Cisco, where she leads a team who ensures their customers can trust its security products, as a position she received following advisory CISO for Cisco. So very excited. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Helen Patton.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Hi, everybody. How are we? I am fully aware that I stand between you and drinks. So I am going to do my best to make it worth your while. I would like you to take your mind back to the first ever job you had, your first ever job, and think about what you learned on that job, and think about whether it applies to cybersecurity. My clicker works. Oh, wrong clicker. Try that, Helen. I grew up in Australia. Not England, not New Zealand, Australia, in the 1980s. My first job was in retail, selling chicken. And I worked for an organization called the Fat Hen. And I had a name badge, and it said the Fat Hen Helen. And I learned conflict management right away. Right away. And to this day, I use it as a CISO. So I was asked to tell you my career path because some people think it might be instructive. I don't know, but I'm going to tell you my career path. Anyway, first, it's way too long. Like, yeah. But when I was done being a high school student in Australia, I accidentally, this is the theme of my career, I accidentally met this Navy guy from the United States and ended up moving to Columbus, Ohio, in the 90s. And I accidentally ended up being employed by an organization that sold accounting software to small businesses in Ohio. And the owner of that organization, without me having any IT experience or any desire to work in IT, taught me IT. So I spent the 90s sitting in front of a box that I probably built myself, stuffing floppy disks into a slot, only to have it blue screen at floppy disk 16. You know the drill. Is everyone in here old enough to remember that? Yeah, right on. My people. Yeah, so 90s. And during the 90s, I ended up working for a software development company. And for those of you who love software development, the 90s was the year of the worm. It was the year of, well, the decade of the worm. It was the decade of the worm. I love you viruses, Melissa viruses. It was Y2K. It was 9/11, not in the 90s. And my boss at the time, who was in New York on 9/11, came back from New York, and said, damn, we need a security program. Helen, you're it. So there I was, voluntarily, involuntarily, voluntold, I'm now working in security. Yay me, and for every student in the room, they're like, damn you, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. So I left that company and went to work for JP Morgan, Wall Street banking, in the early 2000s. Nothing like working for JP Morgan liquidity during 2008 and the liquidity crisis to know you're really alive. Talk about stress in cybersecurity. So I was there for a little while. And then I became the CISO at Ohio State. Woohoo! Any Buckeyes in the room? Any Michigan people in the room? Yeah, right on. I hate you. Anyway, Ohio State, 8 years. And can I tell you, doing security at a university is way harder than doing security at a Wall Street bank. Because it's you people, all you academics who want your own machines and your own systems and your own admin access and your own supercomputers and your own whatever it is you want, makes my life a living hell. Living hell for 8 years, but it was great, it was fun, it was a good place to learn. And now I'm at Cisco. Yay, Cisco. So Cisco, the network company who's now trying to be a security company, by the way, they're doing a good job of it. They're doing a good job of it. That's my career. But notice here, not a cybersecurity degree to be seen. My undergrad is in business administration. My postgrad is in public policy, tech policy, but policy nonetheless. And my experience is really similar to most CISOs or hiring managers who are in the industry today, right? It's just a matter of timing. It's not that I purposely chose not to do a cybersecurity degree or a boot camp or a whatever. It just wasn't available to me. Kids these days, kids. Oh, by the way, along the way I wrote a book. I'm not here to shill the book, but I am part of a committee called the Cybersecurity Canon. And in the cybersecurity canon, we have cybersecurity professionals who review cybersecurity books and make recommendations as to whether or not these books should be read by cybersecurity professionals. So if you're not aware of the canon, go check it out. Some good books there. But I want to tell you a story of somebody getting into cybersecurity a little more recently. And I'm going to call him John, because actually his name's John, so I'm going to call him John. John was a student at Ohio State, and I wanted to have an internship program because Ohio State didn't have a cybersecurity degree when I was there as a CISO. But I thought we needed to give back. So I went to my team, and my team of security people at Ohio State had 40 people in it, which is sort of big for higher ed, actually. But we had 40 people, and I really think if I right-sized the organization, I would have had more like 120 people, right? So I had a third of the people that I needed, but that was the only people I was going to get because the CFO wasn't going to give me any more money, or the provost wasn't going to give me any more money to hire more people. But they were open to me bringing on interns. But here's the problem. Context is really important when you're doing cybersecurity. And to bring somebody into an organization who doesn't really know much about cyber to start with, and to teach them up on cybersecurity, it takes about 6 months. So if I bring someone over the summer, we can teach them up, and right when they're ready to start bringing value back to the organization, they go away. Well, that's not going to work. So we created a co-op program instead. So the way the program worked was in the December of their freshman year, we would recruit. In the summer between freshman year and sophomore year, we would bring them on as close to full-time as the school would let us do it, so 38 hours a week, I think. They would work with us full-time. Then in the fall, when they went back for their sophomore year, they would go part-time. The next summer, they would come back full-time, go back to school part-time during the school year. By the time they graduated, they had about 3 years of work experience under their belt. And of that, about 2.5 years of adding value back to our organization. And John was in our first cohort. The first cohort had 5 people in it. All 5 students had jobs waiting for them when they graduated. That was great. One of them came and worked for us, right? John actually went and worked for a security company who's now a competitor at Cisco, but I don't mind because I like John. He does a good job. It's good for the industry, right? That's John. Meet Bill, not his real name. One of the things I do at Ohio State is that I teach an undergrad class in cyber risk management. It's called Herding the Cyber Cats. You don't have to do any classes to take this class. Anyone can take it. And I had Bill decide to take this class in his senior year. His undergrad was in something in business, not tech. But he took this class, and I explained to him about risks and vulnerabilities and regulations and privacy and sandworm and WannaCry, and we did a tabletop exercises, and he decided he wanted to work in cybersecurity. So he did all the things that I told him to do. He networked, he made sure his resume called out all those skills he learned in non-cyber jobs. And he could not get a job anywhere. He ended up, well, he couldn't get a job in cyber anywhere. He ended up getting a job in a bank doing fraud. It was as close to GRC as he could get. And he kept sending out resumes, and he kept networking and showing up at conferences, and he kept doing these things. He still wasn't getting a job. He was getting interviews, but ultimately he would get looked over in favor of someone who had on-the-job experience. Does this sound familiar to anyone in the room? Yeah? It's a common story, right? He ended up going back to school, to his credit, part-time, because at this point he had a wife and child to take care of. And he got himself a master's in cybersecurity and privacy. Still couldn't get himself a job. At the end of it, he was sending out 40 resumes a week and still not getting a job offer. Turns out he had stayed connected to me, and I knew someone who was looking for a GRC analyst, and I recommended to that hiring manager that they talk to Bill, and they did, and Bill got the job. Yay, Bill. Not a scalable model, really, though, do you think? Networking is one of the things I tell my students and people who come and ask me for mentoring. You've got to be part of a network. I'm part of a network of security CISOs and people who've been in security a long time called the Security Tinkerers. You won't know much about this group because it's invitation only, so forget that you saw that. At RSA, we had our own one-day conference off to the side, and to be part of the conference, you had to give a talk, and you had 10 minutes to give a talk. And I wanted to know what they would put into a cybersecurity curriculum. So these are people who are industry, long-time professionals, names you would probably have seen in various publications. But as you all know, for those of you in academia, you don't just go and decide on a course, right? You've got to get it approved. It's got to be academically rigorous. It's, death by committee. So I put these constraints around them. I won't read them all here. You get the idea. I'm sure you've lived it. And I said to them, you guys have 10 minutes, and there were women in the room too, by the way. You people have 10 minutes to tell me what are the 9 classes that you would put into a curriculum that would satisfy these needs. This is what they came up with. I'm sure you're all shocked and amazed, right? And they did what everyone tries to do. They squashed 3 classes into one. Cheat, cheat, cheat. But they did it. But they looked at this. I'm like, this is the thing. If I went back to academia and said, put these things in your curricula, you'd go, absolutely, I'm going to hire this person. And they're like, well, this is what they came up with. Well, they'd be ready for an internship. Why is this? That was a perfectly good curriculum. Also wrapping around all the general education requirements and capstone and everything that goes along with the bachelor's program, right? But even with all of that, they'd be ready for an internship. So here's the thing. If you're a CISO like me, and I'm going to use the term CISO to be sort of representative of any security hiring manager, what do we think about in terms of improving the pool of qualified talent? We've got a problem with qualified. So I want to give you the CISO view for a little bit. First of all, when you're doing security, context is king. We talk about vulnerability management, being a SOC analyst, threat detection, ethical hacking. You pick your functional area, pick your KSA, pick your skill. But how it is executed depends on the context in which you are working. It will depend on, are you at a Cisco company that's umpty-mumpty years old and has thousands of employees over the world, or are you a startup, right? Are you in a B2B model or a B2C model? Are you retail that has really low margins and high volume and deals with, like if you're Walmart and you're trying to sell Nike shoes, you get DDoSed on your marketing platform by bots, is a different threat model than higher ed that's getting IP loss because a nation state is stealing our agricultural data. It's different. And so when you do vulnerability management, which is this ubiquitous term. We all know what vulnerability management means. It isn't executed the same way because context is different. So what are the skills we need? Do we need vulnerability management, or do we need vulnerability management in a cloud-native tech stack? Or do we need vulnerability management in China as opposed to the United States? Or do we need, you get the idea, right? If you don't follow Kelly Shortridge, you should. Kelly works at Fastly. They're amazing. They blog all the time. They write beautifully, well-researched stuff, professional in the industry. They drew this. When we talk theory, it looks like a horse's ass, that side. We know what it perfectly looks like. But when we take that theory and we apply it to Cisco or JP Morgan or Ohio State or sure as hell Michigan, it looks like the clickety thing on the other side of the drawing. And we need qualified candidates who can take the theory and recognize the reality and do the translation, right? So as you think about your curriculums and your boot camps and your online gaming and all of those things, where is the translation skill that you are putting in place? I know we've heard this trope before. We are not accounting or legal or medicine. There is lots of frameworks, and they're good, and we all tend to follow a framework. But the frameworks articulate an outcome because they recognize the risk profile of the organization is going to vary by organization. So they don't tell you how. They don't tell you do it this way. They don't tell you assets less liabilities equals owner's equity. There is nothing so pristine in cyber. We don't have generally accepted security principles. And by the way, I don't advocate that we should. I know that there are some groups out there that are thinking we should have some licensure, you know what I'm talking about, for cyber. Slippery slope. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's going to be tough though. Context. We have to think of the context in which things are happening. And so before you go and tell people how to do things, you better account for their context. Before you go and train people how to get ready to work in cyber, be clear about the context you're sending them to. Are you sending them to a Fortune 1000 company, or are you sending them to a Silicon Valley startup? It's going to be a different kind of security. I used to do a lot of, I still do, I poll on the socials a lot because my context, as someone who's spent my entire career in large organizations, is not the same context as everybody else. So I want to know what they're thinking. I used to do this on LinkedIn and Twitter. Can't do the Twitter thing anymore. Mastodon's sort of like an empty echo chamber. So right now I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me. And I ask questions, I know that's a bit of an eye chart, but I ask questions like, do you have to be technical to be in cyber? TLDR, no. Is there such thing as an entry-level job in cybersecurity? No. I'm waiting for you all to throw something at me. Do you agree? It's interesting to see what kinds of answers you get. And by the way, whether someone agrees with me or not depends on their context. In my organization, as a CISO in a Silicon Valley tech startup that's cloud native, you better be technical. We only employ technical people. GRC people are technical people who occasionally write a policy paper. That's about as far as GRC as they get. If you're in JP Morgan, no, you don't need to be technical. You need to understand tech, but you don't need to be technical. That's their perspective, right? Is it wrong? No. Their context will tell them. And as you're trying to prepare students or mid-career or post-career people to work in cybersecurity, you better be thinking about how the CISO is thinking about this. So qualified for a CISO is about the ability of the student to apply theory to the local context, right? There is a reason cybersecurity people don't jump from industry to industry like this idiot did, right? It took me a year to learn the difference of context between Wall Street banking and Ohio State. Jamie Dimon said no admin rights, and there were no admin rights in 6 months. I had a professor who sent me a 5-page email dissertation about why password policies and local admin rights were insecure, and he had this computer science PhD to back it up. I just kicked him off the network. Right? But you've got to understand where you're going. So the job seekers need to understand where they're going. You need to help them understand where they're going. The Business Roundtable, by the way, Cisco's a part of the Business Roundtable, is thinking about it through the lens of personas. Who are our job seekers? And what would their path look like? What does the path look like from a non-tech to a tech person? A vet, a military vet, to a non-military person? A diverse group. And what does the job path look like for someone from an economically disadvantaged region versus someone who's grown up in the valley, right? Someone from Australia versus someone from London. It's a good place to start. Security by design is not just about securing architectures and technologies and engineering systems. Security by design is also thinking about design principles and applying them to how we bring people into cybersecurity. And we think about job seekers. If we're thinking about context, pure classroom learning of any kind, even gamification, will get you, I'm going to use a football analogy because Ohio State, it will get you to the 90-yard line. But context gets you over the end, right? People who are already in your organization have context already. So sometimes the place to look first, and as we think about personas, thinking about mid-career people who are already in the companies we work in and bringing them laterally into cyber is a faster path than the traditional path, potentially. Right? Can I just tell you, by the way, that some of the best cybersecurity people in my team at Ohio State were classically trained music teachers, not my computer science engineers. There's a place for computer science engineers, but the people who were most adept at continuing to learn and change, music. Don't ask me why. So my question for you is, how do we foster this experiential learning piece so that students and job seekers can demonstrate that they understand context when they build a resume or apply for a job? So I'm going to wax on poetic about apprenticeships for a second. And what I'm about to tell you, by the way, I've been listening to the talks over today. I'm about to tell you stuff and you're all going to disagree with me. And it was too late for me to change my slides. So I'm just going to throw it out there. Anyway, traditional path. And by traditional path, I mean students who are in university, college, community college, end of high school age today. I'm going to suggest to you that you don't become a fully formed cybersecurity professional for at least a decade. And I will tell you, I recognize that no one is the idiot like me that stays for a decade at the same company. So we need to have a community movement that recognizes and helps the cybersecurity profession be consistent about thinking about these categories of job seekers and how we foster them once they're actually working in cybersecurity. Because, by the way, it's not just about getting people into cyber, it's about keeping them there and having them flourish. So these are just suggestions. You can buy me a beer later and tell me I'm wrong. First of all, in years 1 through 3, you do not want them to specialize. We have a tendency, by the way, as a workforce development community to talk about CISOs or SOC analysts. There are more jobs in cybersecurity than SOC analysts as entry-level positions. Yes, there are entry-level positions. But if we want to do students a favour, we need to get them to try things on. We need to get them to understand the entire system of cybersecurity. You don't just bring them into a SOC and expect them to be good, because they can't do SOC analysis work without understanding how all the other parts of security fit together and how they fit in the organisation. So we want to think about a generalist entry into cybersecurity. In these years, they're going to be spending most of their time in the classroom. So if you're running a community college program or a 4-year program or even a boot camp, yes, expect that they're going to be spending most of their time with you and give them credit for on-the-job learning wherever they can find the on-the-job learning. Help them find the on-the-job learning, right? Make those internships paid. If we want a diverse workforce, we can't just make this voluntary, because only rich people can afford to volunteer their labour, okay? And rotate the assignments. With the co-op that I had at Ohio State, we would give students a choice about what part of cybersecurity they would start in. Guess where they all said? Anyone? Yeah, SOC. I want to hack. When you ask a college student why security, they say, I want to hack. And I send them away and go look at the CISO mind maps that give you the whole landscape of security, and go and look at the whole landscape of security. If you come back and tell me you want to hack, that's fine, but you don't get to hack till year 10. So what are you going to do between now and then? Right? So rotate your assignments and put them in cohorts. If you're in an organisation that's big enough to bring 3 or 4 people on at the same time, do that. If you're not in an organisation big enough to bring 3 or 4 people on at the same time, buddy up with other organisations and share. Okay? Every cybersecurity person must work in identity and access management at some point in their career, preferably early. If you are not including identity and access management skills in your curriculum and your boot camps and your online gaming, you are failing them. And we forget. I have an opinion about that, by the way. In the middle is where we start to specialise. So I get that people say, if you're not technical, don't worry, you can do GRC. You've got to start doing all of it. And then you can decide. Because there are plenty of non-technical people who end up being excellent technologists, and there are people who are technologists who realise that their heart sings when they're doing GRC. Let's not pigeonhole them too early. So in years 3 to 5, now we start to specialise. Okay? And maybe you get a certification at this point. Getting a certification in years 1 through 3 looks really great on a resume, but a hiring manager recognises that they still got to train your ass up. They know that. You've got to have on-the-job experience before the certification has weight. Sorry for all the people who sell certs in the room. Okay? And these people need to train back. It's no good having me, who's been in the industry 30 years, going and starting and telling a college student what it's like to work in security, because my experience will look nothing like theirs. So get somebody who's 2 to 3 years ahead career-wise and have them mentor back. And then at the end, we need to start having people think about the business alignment. Security gets criticised and CISOs get criticised because they don't understand the business and they're implementing security in a vacuum without regard to how business works. It is not until years 6 to 10 that you can appreciate how security works and how you use security to support the business. But this is the learning in this time period. Okay? What else do I need to tell you about this? Decision frameworks. Security is complicated and it's messy, and most of the time, because we don't have generally accepted security principles, the answer is not obvious. We need to help people to think using frameworks about how to apply what they're seeing to what they have to manage. Think about artificial intelligence right now. There are some parts of securing AI that are obvious. Protect the learning model. Access controls. Yep, got it. But What about prompt engineering? We need to have our security people understand how to input into AI and be able to recognize when AI hallucinates, right? But that's not obvious right now. So mental models, convening frameworks and whatever are going to help. And I can't pronounce anything in Welsh because I'm Australian, so don't at me. If you're moving from, say, having 5 to 10 years of experience, and by the way, something else, we have plenty of candidates for entry-level jobs. That is not where we've got security lack of resources. But 5 to 15 years, that middle, this is where we're having trouble hiring. This is where we're having trouble hiring. So we need your help, this collective group, to find ways to quickly move people from careers they're already in to cybersecurity careers without having them start over. Because I don't know about you, but if you're running a young family, listen to me. If you're the parent of a young family, you can't go back to entry-level wages in order to get into cybersecurity. So we've got to help build that bridge up. But in this case, I'm going to tell you, my suggestion is, yes, there is still a first year. It's quick, and it's only 1/3 of the time in the classroom. Boot camps and so forth, really useful here. Or self-paced online learning, really useful here. But we still need rotating assignments. We still need mentors. And I'm going to tell you that we need to keep the pay levels of those individuals at the same level that they were from until they get up to speed in the cybersecurity space, or they won't move over. So, have I yelled at you enough yet? Here's the thing, nice idea, Helen, or maybe not a nice idea, you can tell me later, but how do you get that done? If you're a CISO or somebody who's hiring, first of all, I'm going to tell you where you can, you need to hire in cohorts. Security is a hard job, and there are no real good answers to how to get things done. And we tend to, one, get into security because of who we know. Just remember Bill, he knew me. I helped him get a job. And two, we stay in security because we've got cohorts of people that we can lean on when things get shitty. The security tinkerers, that group I'm a part of, we do therapy every Friday. We get on a Zoom call together. It's like, hey, how's your week? And sometimes it's, my dad died. And sometimes it's, my boss is an idiot. And sometimes you get the idea, right? And we lean on one another. We need to have cohorts to help people not only get into security, but like to stay in security, to be able to handle the ups and downs of it. We need to make sure that we pay people and we transfer them appropriately. We need to rotate our entry-level people for the first couple of years. We need to have enough money in the budget to continue to facilitate training. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to suggest that you want to look inside for those adjacent roles before you look outside. And we need you to build communities of interest inside your organization. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And we need, as hiring managers, to get active on social media. People coming into security today are still going to join you as a leader. So we need our hiring managers to have a presence that talks about how they do security. Because again, security in Walmart is really different than security in a hospital. And we need to be clear about what the jobs look like and what the day-to-day of the work looks like if we're going to hire the right people in. To our friends in HR and recruiting, please, we are not a subset of IT. Don't do that. I'm going to be really nasty about that in a second. Security is not IT. Do you need IT to do security? Yes. Does security exist because of IT? Yes. Is it a subset? No. In fact, what I would tell you is IT is a subset of security. So have one job family for IT and have 10 job families for security, because that would be more accurate. Okay? Degrees are optional. I know. You're all getting there. We need HR and recruiting to train cybersecurity people on how to coach and mentor. The prevailing opinion in cyber is I did it by myself, so you should be able to do it for yourself too. Nobody goes through security training in college and is taught how to coach or mentor, or what the difference is between coaching and mentoring, right? And in big organizations, there might be internal training programs on that, but no one requires the security people to take it, because God forbid they actually have to coach and mentor their staff. So can we please expect more out of the security hiring people? We need our HR and recruiting partners to help us understand that. We also, by the way, need our HR and recruiting people to help us write better job descriptions. Again, there's a dearth of training around how to write a good job description. I know you all talk about it, but the security community sure doesn't. So we need the professionals' help. And by the way, we need a non-security person to look at a job description and go, what's that acronym? What's that for? Do you really need that? If we're going to have a diverse workforce, there is no job description that should have more than 3 requirements on it. I'm serious. Pick your tech of choice. I need you to know the basics of vulnerability management. It's my favorite go-to at the moment. Vulnerability management or compliance. I need you to know that. I need you to work well with other people. The don't be an asshole rule, right? I need you to know how to functionally not be an asshole. That encompasses all those skills that someone incorrectly calls soft skills, which are really hard to do. Don't be an asshole. Skill number 2. Skill number 3, you need to be able to translate what you know from classrooms to the functional area. You need to give me a demonstration where you've done that. And that doesn't mean you have to have done cybersecurity, but it does mean that you need to have done some research on my organization and have an opinion about how cyber might work. Okay. The other thing is, we get lazy in security because we think we can automate everything, because we're told we should automate everything. But if we're going to find diverse talent, we've got to go to the diverse talent. So we need HR to help us work out where diverse talent is and be able to help us get there. So that's HR and recruiting. I put other partners on this. I mean anything with a C on it. CFO, CMO, CEO, you get the idea. Again, security is a discrete function, not a sub-IT function. Do not have the CISO report to the CIO. All my jobs I've reported to the CIO. It can work, but it depends on the people. In general, as a vanilla statement, don't make them the same organization. Recognize that security is a hot job. I've been in organizations where they're like, well, we can't pay security people more because then they'd get paid more than the developers. So pay them more than the developers. It's okay, right? We need to be considering retention bonuses. We have this problem where it's really hard to get into cybersecurity, but once you're in, it's easy to move around. So what happens is we spend a lot of money to bring people in, and as soon as they've got 6 months or 12 months in role, they go and get a job that pays them 30% more somewhere else. We need a way to keep them in place. Now, do I want to bribe them to keep them in place? Does that feel good? Hell yeah, it does. I want them there if they're good. If they want to go, I'm going to let them go. But if they're good, I want them to stay, and I want them to be compensated for it. Because we can't keep the market up. As an incumbent, you can't keep up with the market. So we need to think about retention bonuses. We need non-security people to get rotated into security. There is a whole bunch of pressure on security to say, you've got to understand the business. But I would tell you that we need the business to understand security if we're going to have secure organizations. So as much as we rotate people from security into business functions, we need the opposite to be true. And by the way, some of the people that rotate through are going to really like it, and they're going to want to stay. And that's good, right? And we need leadership to understand that to have a good security team requires investment. What I tell people in the United States, in my organizations, is that I expect that my budget includes at least $8,000 per person per year for training and conference attendance. At least $8,000. That's minimum level. Do I get it? Never, by the way. Doesn't mean I don't stomp my foot, tell them that they need it. Networking is a hugely important part of security growth. If you're not enabling your people to go to networking events like this one, they will fall behind, right? So yes, network the hell out of things to get into cybersecurity, but keep networking. There's a theme, can you tell? Here's the thing, I recognize that smaller companies can't do this. My colleague Wendy Nather coined the term the cybersecurity poverty line. You can go take it, you can Google it. She's got a talk about it. But we recognize that there are some organizations, because of their age or the business they're in or whatever, they just don't have the resources to do the things that we're talking about. In that case, we need communities to step up and facilitate this as a community effort. State and local governments in particular need our help in this regard. I have a colleague, his name's Josh Gorman, and he runs a company called I Am the Cavalry, which talks about the security of healthcare devices in particular. And he did a talk at RSA this year that talked about, of all the critical infrastructure industries, which ones are the most critical. And no surprise, water means that we have food, and water means that we have medicine, and water, you get the idea, right? And water is managed by local governments across the United States and internationally, and they have security teams that are like half an IT engineer and a dog. And you think I'm kidding. They really need our help, right? So we need to think about, as a community effort, how do we help those parts of our supply chain that are below the poverty line? And I would put state and local government there. Academia, you are in the perfect position to be the glue of these kinds of efforts, right? Or you can think about doing it by regional area. Everybody in Seattle comes together, forms a cohort that then pulls apprentices into their organizations and shares them and hires from that cohort. Or you could do it by vertical, all of higher ed, through EduCause or whatever does something similar, right? And don't forget your vendors. Security vendors want partnerships with you. Go ask them for money for this kind of thing. My people at Cisco are going to hate me, but they're not here, so there you go. So here's the thing. When you're a CISO, when you're a practicing security person, we need academia and government and leadership to understand that we want to be hiring these people, but we need your help to do it. And the challenge is that every organization has a different risk profile. It has a different risk appetite. And because of that, the way we do security will vary from organization to organization. And because of that, the skills and experience we need from candidates coming into our organizations also need to change and be different. And we recognize that that doesn't scale very well. And we recognize that that's the reason cybersecurity is going to be around for a long time, even if artificial intelligence is here to stay. Yeah? It's organizations like this one that will enable the right kind of thinking to be able to get us to move forward into the future and be able to have context-aware job candidates to fill the roles that we need to have filled. And we need this group here to also help the hiring managers understand that yes, they have their own unique snowflake needs, but the talent is out there. Someone put up a poll that says, do we have a talent shortage or is it a supply side problem? I'm going to tell you my perspective is the talent is there. But we lack the creativity to tap that talent and bring it into our organizations. So we need you to help us rethink that. But we also need you to understand the context in which we work so that our minds can meet in the middle. And I recognise this is not just because it's Pride. Happy Pride, everyone. I recognise that it's not easy, but it's doable, and it's worth doing. So I thank you all for your service in this effort. And if you have any questions or you want to come and throw something at me because I'm from Ohio State, feel free to do that afterwards. And hopefully I've given you something to think about and come debate me about later on. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Wow, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you again to Helen Patton for that fantastic closing session. I am the last thing stuck between you and alcohol. I do know that. But I would ask that you pull out your Hoover app when you get a moment. Make sure that you're giving the poll on the surveys of the different breakouts that you're attending. Your feedback allows us to get an understanding of what some of the top topics are that you're looking at. So our evening reception will be immediately outside. Again, look forward to you all. We have 3 bartending stations for you, and we hope that you can stick around until 6 p.m. and just have some great conversation, network, and meet someone new. So thank you all. That concludes day 1 of the NICE conference.